I took a long break now. At least to me, it feels long from social media and things like that. Not that I ever used it for anything particularly social. What I used social media for was mainly to try and gain some traction, do the things of like engagement, find ways to put my name out there, potentially get commissions, things like that. But after. Oh, okay, you're good, kitten. I have a good. Okay. But after Kilo was passing, I took a long break from that. But yeah, I feel like it's time to start getting back on that because otherwise, how am I going to potentially attract people to get commissions and things like that, and try and make something out of something that way. So yeah, I gotta I want to, not just but I really do want to. I want to get back to sharing and putting forth that effort and hoping to build something up, even if it's slowly. So yeah, gonna get back into that. And this is oh no, okay. Off you go, off you go. Okay. So, yeah. Excuse me. Right now I'm dealing with someone who has no idea like what they're talking about or what they're going through. Not what they're going through. What they're like saying or what their words are implying. They're trying to do a commission and they have no idea. I'm trying to like guide them into like asking the right questions in regards to pricing, getting the right details and things like that, but they're very just they have no idea they're trying to run the whole thing off of like vibes and things like that, and run it off of like these wonderful pictures and photographs that I saw, and they're drawings, not like actual photos, but they're so beautiful to me, and I know that this is exactly what I want and need. And then I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And then I look up the rates that the people who made that, did, and like they're like, oof, and that is the appropriate price though for that amount of effort and work. And then I let the person know, and they're like, oh, that's a little. Why are you being so pricey? And, those are just the images I looked up for inspiration. Like, it didn't cost me. Basically, the best way to say that they're wording it is that they're implying because it took them 5 minutes to look it up and download it, it shouldn't cost anything. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, well, what are you what are you talking about? I'm thinking to myself that. I say it differently, but I'm thinking to myself, what are you talking about? It took you 5 minutes to find something that was already finished years ago and took the person who made it like months to make. That's like, yeah, that's not how this works. Like I'm thinking to myself, you need to be realistic about this. That's time spent doing that, which could be spent doing other things to try and make a living or support oneself or something like that. This isn't me drawing for free for fun. Like, this is something that's actually going to take time and effort and things like that. But so then I got more specific, like read through the commission sheet, ask questions, and do this. And all the person did was just give me like, these pictures are so wonderful. I know I want them. This, and started telling me about like the lore of their world and things like that. And like, this is everything I want, and not everything they want like for the picture. They're telling me everything they want in terms of the ambition of their I want it to be an amazing, iconic world that becomes a comic project with all kinds of cultures and subcultures, with this area and that area, and like these groups, and like this thing, not telling me anything about what they'd actually want for the picture that they want, or any examples, or the drawing, or anything. The person's just waxing poetic about all their ambitions and the dreams that they have and their misgivings, and I'm just keeping my hands off of it, just leaving it be. Yeah. Just I'm gonna let that go for right now. If they bring it up again, but the person is like, they don't understand at all what they're doing with this, and it would be better for me to start looking for where things actually do are conducive to actually getting a commission set up and figuring out pricing, figuring out what the person wants. The person actually knows what they want out of the thing that they're asking for, and not just in a vague general sense of their ambitions. Anyway, so one of the key reasons that I have been out for about 3 days now, is it about 3 days? It is about 3 days. Is that once again, I have been co-DM on the Dungeons and Dragons campaign that I was running. One on Friday. Right, okay. So, it wasn't all 3 days, so it was on Friday. Then on Saturday, I did a special streaming thing where my very close friend and I took notes on, like, game design stuff. And we went through something, we took notes on it, we made like a document, basically, is the best thing I could say. So we went through that. It was pretty late. It was after I got home from work, so that pretty much took up all the time there. Yeah. That pretty much took up all that time. And yeah, and then there was the DMing the previous day. And then yesterday, I got home from work. And again, it was co-DMing. But, oh, okay, so I'll tell you about it. The one on Friday was not great. Not very great. I left feeling very, very upset from that experience. And, made up for it yesterday. But on Friday, like, it was awful. There were players just like, there was players who were just like dictating outcomes and entire events and like maps before we even said anything. Like, it was another player's turn and the person was rolling, and like, I rolled a 20, I get this thing, and it's like, your character is all the way over here across the map. You're not even in that place yet. You don't even know it's in there. Or like, we haven't called any scenarios, we haven't called any roles, we haven't described anything to you, and the person is over here like dictating and making rolls, somehow teleporting their character across, and just like, I get the thing. Yeah, I rolled a stealth check. I rolled for stealth. I did it. And it's like, we never called for stealth. We never did anything like that. That was one thing. And then, like, another thing was that, like, turns weren't ending at all. So to be specific, we're not the most experienced, and though my one very good friend is running the campaign for his friends, and he gets very like, he doesn't want to hurt their feelings. He gets very like personal. He's very amiable. He's incredibly friendly. He's like thinking about other people's like feelings all the time and things like that. And so he didn't want to hurt their feelings. He didn't want to, seem imposing or demanding or anything like that. So, like, the player would do this, and he would end up, like, sometimes allowing it, and then I would end up having to step in and be like, hold on, where are you even going? What is this role even for? We didn't call that. And then I would end up having to be the person like, no, go back. You're not going anywhere. You're right there. That kind of thing. And then, but then I realized that, wait a minute, turn orders and movement. Like, this player has moved way more than they're supposed to ever be able to. And also their turn is lasting forever. And then the other players are like, oh, they just give the spotlight. This is their scene. And I'm thinking to myself, this is collaborative storytelling. This is not a TV show, and I was about to, like, kind of put my foot down and be like, no, her turn, this person's turn is over. This person's turn is over. Like, and then they felt pressured and awkward they felt kind of like pressured, and that kind of feeling of like, we're being selfish or taking the spotlight away from you. So for their turns, they were just like, yeah, for our turns, we just sit there and do nothing. And so it just became this one player enacting out a really hackneyed scene where they continued to keep calling out their own roles and outcomes and all that, just completely ignoring, what makes the game, like, work or special or anything like that. And it was just like ridiculous. And on top of that, like, missing context that was purposely withheld and would have been incredibly important to know, and then the players got all confused and they were about to, like, mess something up, and then I had to step in and, like, try and correct that, because I saw, like, a ton of time was about to get wasted. It's not the kind where, like, the player chooses to do something that uses up time or anything like that. It's something where there's literally just something that, like, DM did not share that they absolutely should have. It is about to, like, it's DM error that's about to mess up, like, everybody. So I went to go correct that, and then there was, like, it was like a whole thing. It was a whole thing, and it lasted for, like, a long while, and then, like, I had to go take care of something. Like, I actually did. I had to go take care of something audio related, and I couldn't be listening in on it at the same time, and there was, like, music playing, and I needed to do something with, like, music myself, so I had to leave. But then I left, and I was just like, that was that was bad. That was really bad, and I just felt, like, super upset. And so I made out of, like, a list of, like, each thing, and I talked to my one very good friend about it, and like, we worked through it, and like, we came to, like, agreements on stuff, and like, worked out things, and, like, yeah, enforcing turn order and movement and stopping this whole, like, one character spotlight, you get a whole scene to yourself type stuff. Like, no, we got to do turn orders. We got to make sure that, like, there's options for each person, that they're able to move through, that there's never a moment where they're just like, like, oh, this is their scene, so we're just not gonna do anything out of, like, obligation, or anything like that. I know there are times where people may decide to do, like, my character rests or something like that, or doesn't do anything, and then just allow some, but let it be because it's legitimate, not because of this whole lopsided, thing going on here. So we talked about all that, and we gained a lot of experience this time from a mess, But so yesterday's was, like, the complete opposite of that. We were on point. And the thing with, like, the one we do on Sundays. It's the same story, but unfortunately, the party that we're working with ended up due to scheduling had to split up. So we have like two sort of teams that we end up having to work with. Eventually they'll be able to reconvene, but right now, they're on like a bit of a split scheduling kind of thing. So the one on Sunday, there's a guy there who's very experienced, and he always like helps to work with the rules. And for a while, we were kind of relying on him and being more like dependent on him. And we quickly realized that with the other team where he's not there, that we had to start standing on our own a lot more. So yesterday's one, we did so. We started looking more into like movement and turn orders. Like first off, we learned all the lessons from Friday's one. And so we started applying that like immediately, right on the fly, and all of a sudden things like got engaging. Things started moving, and we weren't relying on that player as much to like we would ask him questions occasionally, but for the most part, like 90% of it, we were co-DMing, moving our way through, making the right checks, stopping for rolls, making sure that the excuse me, making sure that the oh my gosh, making sure that the proper effort was exhibited, and that they did what they were supposed to do, and that we did what we were supposed to do, rolled the right checks, made the right context, did the right amount of damage, rolled the right rolls, got the movements, the amount of movement down, dash actions, I made sure to study up on how like turn orders work more like clearly, how movement works, difficult terrain. It was like a whole thing, and it turned out wonderfully. I'll tell you. It was great. Fantastic, even. I, as a joke, I think I mentioned it. Did I mention it on the last time I talked about this? Well, to put it, I'll mention it again then. I'm trying to think about it, but it doesn't really matter. But so as a fun thing to give me something more to do, I took control of a goblin, like a standard goblin enemy, a standard goblin enemy, and I looked up the goblin stats, and my one very good friend would take control of, well, to be the DM for all the other enemies, but then I would take control of this one specific goblin, and a 1 in 500 scenario occurred that neither of us thought was going to happen. That possibly could happen. Like, I set up this goblin with a goal. I set him up with a goal to accomplish something. And it was, here, I'll try and be vague about it, so as not to get too, say too much. But one of our player characters is playing a character who has horns. And they kept killing a lot of goblins, just like mercilessly, unprovocated most of the time, with those horns. And so my goblins set themselves to like, I'm going to take one of those horns, at least one of them. And so, like, I came up with a whole scenario and, like, joke of, like, I would try to do this, and ha ha ha. These are goblins, though. So, that they're going to die really fast. So, my one very good friend and I, we both assumed that, like, what was actually going to happen is that the player character was just going to kill, any goblins that were left, and that would be it. That would be the end of the dream. It's over. That kind of thing. But no. 1 in 500, I don't even know, 500, 1 in 1,000, 1 in a million. The scenario, basically, some fantastic rolls taking place, some great dodges, some amazing survivability, some great constitution saves, and it ended with my. It ended with that player character getting knocked the heck out, going unconscious, and the goblin I was playing taking like a piece of steel, shooting the horn with an arrow, cracking it, the person going unconscious, and then my goblin taking a piece of steel and dramatically, and I remember the description of it. It's like lifts it up into the air and in one strike dramatically brings it down onto the crack on the horn, and with like a ringing sound, like it brings the piece of steel down, and with that sound, the horn cracks, shatters off of the player character's head, and is completely severed or broken off near the base from that player character's head, and my goblin character claimed that with one health left, claimed the player character's horn. And then afterwards, the goblin character was like completely out of it, and then another player character used persuasion and ended up snatching the horn out of that goblin's hands, and then that goblin, with their last act, used a bow and arrow to drop a net full of gunpowder, and this goblin also had a cigar. Oh, that was another thing. Oh, I'll tell you about that in a second. But the goblin character. So okay, I'll say it right now. So these goblins all had this wasn't planned at all. So there was a joke goblin who had a pack of cigars, and that goblin was killed by that player character, and then another goblin enemy ended up picking up that cigar, and then that one ended up there was like a pack of cigars that got picked up, and then that pack of cigars ended up with a goblin who ended up dying, ended up with another goblin who ended up giving a cigar to another goblin, and then that goblin ended up helping my goblin, but then ended up getting killed. That goblin ended up dying from their own move, helping my goblin to set up their final attack. So that goblin. So there was like a sort of like tense band, like huge thing. This goblin had to make strength checks and take multiple turns to like pull back this like giant band, basically with a large pad on the end, and they were going to release it, but then that player character punched him in the face. He ended up surviving, though. Like, it was some good rolls. Ended up like with very low health, and had to make a constitution save to keep like holding, and a strength check to like keep holding on to the. No, he made the strength check to keep holding it. Had to make a constitution to keep the wherewithal to keep holding it, and he passed it, and then there was no like ammunition to the player character was right there, so he made a roll to adjust himself, and then just released it, this giant band, which like whoosh, smacked the player character in the face, but he knew that the rebound was gonna come back and kill him, so he took like one last puff of his cigar and just stood there as the band came back, and just and this goblin went flying and like smashed into a wall in the back as like his spirit left him, but his cigar like was knocked out of his mouth and left there on the ground, which is the cigar he got from the previous goblin, who he got from the previous goblin, who he got from that previous goblin, who got it as a joke. So that goblin, and then this one cigar kept getting passed around from goblin to goblin, and so Like, yeah, he like took his last whiff. He dropped his cigar, got hit by the rebound of the band. You know, he just accepted his death and got hit back. And so this goblin, you know, then he got the horn, and then the another player character went and took it out of his hands, and so he went released the net, which was full of gunpowder. So my goblin ended up, well, before this he had picked up the cigar that the previous goblin who sacrificed himself was smoking while he had the horn, and then it got stolen, and then he dropped a net full of gunpowder. And keep in mind, I should say I'm not the one. I wasn't the one. Out of fairness, since I was so like personally playing this enemy, I didn't want to set up, you know, the room. I didn't want to, you know, make it to my advantage. I just let my one very good friend handle like whatever was there was there. Pretend I was just like a playing this goblin, and that's it. I was just helping with things like descriptions and things like that, but I wasn't dictating like what was in the room necessarily. That way, it was more fair, you know. But these barrels are full of gunpowder, and so the player character steals the horns. The gunpowder drops, fills the room, and my goblin with his last like bit of life, he takes the cigar that he was smoking and he flicks it into the gunpowder, igniting it in a massive explosion that fills the room. And my one very good friend and I made a joke that before the explosion engulfs him, that he like disappears like Master Oogway in Kung Fu Panda. He like disappears into petals. You know, his life has left him, so his body, his spirit has left, so his body just like goes into sparkles or petals as he disappears, and the cigar ignites the gunpowder and blows up the entire room, and the extreme heat ends up melting the horn that the other player character had had taken from the goblin. So in the end, the horn is like it is, yeah, it's just a melted chunk. So that was exciting. Yeah, one that was some amazing rolls. Amazing. That was exhilarating. I was shaking. I was hyperventilating. I had to like calm myself down because I never thought in my life that that would happen at all. That was, I couldn't believe it. Uh but it worked, and yeah, Goblin passed away a Goblin hero, defeating someone who had to this point just been goring goblins to death. And keep in mind, these are like very sentient goblins who crack jokes and like, you know, they just exist. They're not malicious goblins. They're basically just like little guys. They're little comedic goblin guys. You know, he's like, I'm a little goblin. I'm just trying to make a living. You know, that kind of thing. That's how my one very good friend likes to play the goblins. They're basically just like, you know, on the clock kind of guys who are getting hired, and you know they're doing their jobs, and they don't really necessarily want to be here. You know, that kind of thing. They're very lighthearted, comedic little guys, and they're getting like gored to death on site by this player character, and so one goblin decided to step up and try and be a hero. That was that was something. I felt so happy that I played this goblin to that point, That, oh yeah, that's right. And because the player character dropped below their, hit zero, went unconscious. The goblin, because hitting the horn with the steel, it counted as a failed death save. Yeah, I ex because of these amazing one in a 5 billion chances, I accidentally brought a player character to that point, playing as a basic little goblin enemy, who by all means should have died in at the start. That was, even as I'm saying it, I'm kind of getting excited. That was, mm, that was something. That was really something. That was exciting. Yeah. I'll end that story there. But yeah, it's just, eh. Is there anything else I want to say before I stop? No. Yeah, there is. I managed to find some really good meals at work that are very filling, and so I managed to avoid having to eat at home. So I've saved myself 3 meals in the freezer. And budgeting on that, so got 3 free meals from work. They were very filling. Didn't have to eat 1 meal a day for those 3 days, and now I can just eat at home now. You know, eat my one piece of steak for the day. Thankfully, managed that. So, yeah, that's it. That's all I got for right now.